So just a few words on publications. Whether you plan to be a designer or a researcher by trade, you need to be aware of research, of course. There will be literature review that you will write for your thesis, or even for a design project, there will be some review of theory and literature and so forth. And so it's important to understand about publications. And not all publications are created equal. In fact, I have a spreadsheet where I keep track of all the publications that I know about, all the different journals that I know about that could possibly be related to our field. And so far, I think I have around 340-ish journals listed in that spreadsheet. So there's a lot. There's no way I can read 340 journals. It's impossible. So what you want to do is make sure that you are reading the most important journals in your field to help you in your practice and not wasting your time on all the rest. So that brings us to the question about what are the top journals for you, for your particular area of expertise and interest. And so one of the things I want you to do for Monday's class is to come prepared to talk about a conference in the field that you would want to attend and a journal that you think might be relevant to you out of all the journals that are out there. But how would you know whether a particular journal is a good quality one or a bad quality one? And that's important to know. I've made that mistake before. When I was a student, I sweated a year on an article, about a year I spent on that article, and we found a journal that we thought kind of matched the paradigms of this article, so we submitted it and waited about 3 or 4 months. I didn't hear anything, so I emailed the editor and said, I'm just kind of wondering what you did with my article, if you sent it out for review, if the reviewers are still looking at it, just kind of wondering. And the editor wrote me back and said, oh yeah, that article's already published. It's on the website. And I went, it's already published? You didn't even ask me to revise anything? You didn't do any copy editing? You didn't do a copyright release form? You didn't do anything? Well, what I realized was I had submitted this hard-worked article that I'd spent so much time working on to a piece of garbage journal, and basically I just wasted all that work because no one's going to be able to read it. Now, they can search for it, sure, on the internet, but nobody reads that journal and nobody thinks that journal is any good, so I pretty much just wasted that. Make sure you don't make that mistake. So, how can you go about knowing if a journal is high in quality? People have different ways that they think. Sometimes people think that if it has a low acceptance rate, that alone means the article is, or the journal is high quality. Some people think if it has an impact factor, that means it's high quality. Some people think if it's open access, that means it's high quality. Peter Rich and I have actually published an article on this where we argue that quality in scholarship comes from three things: rigor, impact, and prestige. And like the three legs of a stool, you get the best sense of the quality of a journal from looking at all three of these areas, not just at one. You look at just one and you may be getting kind of a skewed perception about that journal. So, for example, let's go back and look at that. So rigor, what would rigor be? Well, rigor would be things like, actually I think I do have a slide on that, here it is. Rigor would be things like acceptance rates that all of these things can be skewed and can be made biased by the editors and by choices, the editorial choices that are made. But that's why if you look at all three together, you get a little bit more of a holistic perception. But some ways you can look at rigor are things like acceptance rates. And you can learn more about acceptance rates from a directory called Cabells, C-A-B-E-L-L-S. That is in, you go to the BYU library and look under the databases, just like you would look for ERIC databases and stuff like that. You would look for Cabells directories, and that would be where you could learn about acceptance rates. Basically, Cabells emails all the journals and asks them what their acceptance rate is and then reports it. You can also look on the journal's website, oftentimes, to learn what their acceptance rate is. Also, if a journal is blind reviewed, double blind reviewed, that means you don't know who reviewed your article and they don't know who you are. That is an indication of high rigor. The type of editor could be an indication of how rigorous the journal is. If it's, Michael Hanafin is the editor, then that means something. If it's, Bob Reeser is the editor, that means something. If it's just somebody that, you've never heard of before, then it doesn't mean as much. The impact can be important as well. So things like the ISI impact factor. And if you don't know how to find the ISI impact factor, you can do that by going to the Web of Science directory in the BYU library. So you go to what's one of the directories available there, and it will be impact factors or impact, I can't remember, journal impact ratings or something like that. And basically it's a statistic showing how often articles in that journal get cited. You can also look at things like circulation. If a journal, is widely circulated, such as open access, for example, or, bundled and sold to tens of thousands of libraries, then it has not necessarily a guarantee of impact, but more potential for impact. So you could also look at if it's sponsored by a particular organization, like for example, ETR&D is the official journal of AECT. So if you join AECT, you get free access to ETR&D. So pretty much everyone in AECT reads ETR&D. So, being sponsored by a professional organization can be kind of an indication of potential, at least, for impact. You can also look at Google Scholar citation ratings. So one of the things that I do when I look at journals is I will go to Google Scholar and I will look up their what they call the citation metrics. So you might consider looking up those. So the other thing that you could look at is things like prestige. And that's just kind of the gut check. If you were to ask people what they think about the journal, do they think it's good? Do they think it's not good? And there's actually been several articles on this published in our field. So if you're interested, email me, I can send them to you. But there have been people who've done research who have surveyed, a couple hundred professors in the field or practitioners, and then asked them and said, which journal do you think is most prestigious, and list your top 5 or list your top 10. And so that's basically a research study that's assessing the prestige of journals. Doesn't necessarily mean they're more rigorous or more impactful. It might, but it's at least what they're most prestigious for. So I think, and what Peter thinks, is don't look at any one of these independently, but look at all 3 of them together, and together that can provide a pretty good indication of the quality of the journal.